Hello and welcome to the SmartBear Founders Series. In this episode, we're having a conversation with the founders of Cucumber on a little bit of the later stage of the history of Cucumber in the more recent months. So I'm speaking with Sebros, Aslak Helsoy, and Matt Wynn today. And we're talking a little bit about most recently, just really a little bit under a year ago, SmartBear acquired Cucumber. And if you think back a little bit before that time, what were you working on? Did you have any inkling that you were about to be acquired? And what were you spending your time on?
Oh, we were working on lots of things. Who wants to go first?
It depends how far back you go. I mean, I was invited to SmartBear Connect in, I think, October of the year before the acquisition in
2018.
in June. So yeah, that would have been 2018 now. And I just thought I was going along to speak at a company's conference, and then I got an email saying, "Hey, while you're here, would you like to meet the CEO?" And so I thought, well, that's very friendly. And, so I had a conversation for about half an hour with Justin, at the end of which he said, well, we could always, for want of a better word, acquire you. So we'd seen it coming for a while. I came home from that trip and sort of told everybody else. And, we started to explore that as one of our options as an organization. And I think in the meantime, what we were predominantly working on was the product that we were calling Jam, or we were just in the process of rebranding actually from Cucumber Pro to Jam, which is the thing that we now call Cucumber Studio. So that's what I was predominantly working on was that. But we were it was a difficult time for the organization really, because we were pretty strapped for cash. So actually, like, we were kind of shuffling around our responsibilities around the same time. So actually I took over running the training business, didn't I, Seb, while you were off doing other things?
Yeah, I was consulting on a client site. I had been for the previous couple of years running the training business and bringing on new trainers. And yeah, Matt picked up that piece of work, and I went back into consulting mode. So yeah, it was a time when we were shifting around, finding different things to do. As I said in the last interview, it was about, as founders, you've got to balance lots of different things. And I balanced it by dumping the training or offering the training as an opportunity for Matt to enjoy.
And Aslak, something you said, Matt, which is, for lack of a better word, acquisition. And it's technically, yes, an acquisition, but I like to think of it a little bit more as a merger or a coming together. And especially when you're leading an open source community, you don't really acquire it. It sort of has a life of its own. So love to kind of get your take on, the open source side of things through, what is technically an acquisition, but how was that going in your mind beforehand?
So in the year before the acquisition, I was also contracting with clients and trying to spend as much time as I could maintaining the open source project. But the billable work that I was doing was distracting from the open source maintenance. So this is a period where I think we all wished that we could spend more time working on the open source side of things. And when we were approached by SmartBear, I think for the first time we were starting to toy with the idea that, if that goes through, at least hopefully, we'll have more time to spend on maintaining the open source project, because we are not going to have to run a business anymore. That's going to be taken care of by SmartBear. So yeah, it was it's always been difficult to maintain the open source project until we got acquired by SmartBear.
Right. It definitely it does have a life of its own.
Yeah, and it's difficult to justify spending time on it, because the money you make from open source is so indirect. You know, you don't nobody pays to use it, but it's by growing the community that we indirectly make money through other services and products.
Right, and helping people and training them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we had this strategy that we'd had for a long time, that we wanted to transition away from running the business as a training company, which is effectively what we were doing, in order to sustain the time that we spent on the open source and transition it more into having commercial products that people were paying licenses for. So we had effectively a passive revenue. Because at that, you know, as things were, we were having to go out and get on planes and deliver training courses in order to keep food on the table. And because SmartBear wanted to do exactly the same thing, that was where it started to look like a good partnership. You know, there's a track record of supporting other open source tools as they come in, and basically it looked like we were going to be able to kind of accelerate the plan that we already had, because everybody wanted to do the same thing, and SmartBear had the resources to help us to get on and do it.
Right. And through the beginning discussions around the acquisition, did you have any, you know, misgivings or cons or things you were worried about that you can share?
Go on, Matt.
Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I mean, we had a sort of like a consensus process for making this decision there were 6 of us all together, all owned an equal stake in Cucumber. So there was the 3 of us on this call. There was Julian, there was Steve, and there was also Sal, who's not been on these calls, Sal Freudenberg, who was also a co-owner. And we'd committed to making the decision by consensus. So, you know, any one of us could say that they didn't want to do it and block it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were 2 of us really. Julian and I were probably the most concerned with the decision, just because we were pretty committed at that time to the idea of maintaining our independence as an organization, right? So being able to make our own decisions about the future of the company and how we ran it. And that wasn't going to be possible once we became owned by SmartBear, right? Because it was a different thing. And so, you know, when we laid ourselves out across a line of like, how in favor or against this decision are you? And Aslak and Seb were the most strongly in favor, and Julian and I were the most discontented with the decision. But I think at no point did either of us ever say that we wouldn't go along with it if it was what everybody else wanted to do. We just had strong concerns about how much the culture of the organization would change, what it would be like to work for somebody else, basically, rather than working for ourselves, and kind of how safe the open source community thing, it's difficult to put a name on it really, but how safe that thing was in the hands of a more commercially minded organization, because obviously we'd founded it out of our love and passion for it, that wasn't necessarily going to be the case for a more kind of commercially minded organization. So those were the concerns really, was was it going to be safe in SmartBear's hands?
We were also concerned because there weren't just the 6 founders, but there are employees and contractors as well, and we wanted to make sure that that we weren't unfair to them. They didn't have necessarily any stake in the company, but nonetheless their livelihoods did depend on how the deal went through.
Right. And you've certainly kind of shown a very strong set of advocacy, internal advocacy for your brand, for the community, for everything you're doing throughout the past year with SmartBear, I think that's made all of us into, you know, a better company combined with a better outcome, just making the right decisions and coming to a lot of consensus around how we treat the brand, how we treat naming. So I hope that sense of independence is continuing to some extent, and I think it's helping all of us certainly. So don't stop that for sure. If there are other entrepreneurs or aspiring founders listening to this, do you have any advice on others, any lessons learned, what folks should look for if they're going through an acquisition process? And oftentimes, you know, there's one or two or three potential acquirers. How would you advise people to pick the right partner?
Yeah, well, I think for us at least, what was important was that SmartBear would be a good cultural fit for us. You know, we were in a situation where we could go ahead with it and say, yeah, we would like to negotiate an acquisition, or we could just walk away and say, actually, no, we're not interested. And we needed to figure out what we wanted to do. And as Matt said, you know, we had to agree within our own organization, are we categorically against selling, or is it something that we're all interested in? And the next thing we started doing once we agreed that, okay, we are going to explore this acquisition, was we needed to understand more about who SmartBear is. And I think the way we did that worked pretty well. We talked to a bunch of people in SmartBear, and also people who are no longer in SmartBear, to get a frank, at least as frank as possible, description of as many people as possible of, you know, what is this company like? Does the SmartBear have a way of operating that is aligned with how we would like to do things, and so on.
There's also for, oh, sorry, just ask that. Was this?
No, I was just going to summarize and say, you know, talk to as many as you can to get a sense of what you're walking into.
So what I was going to add was anyone getting into that situation shouldn't kid themselves that it's an easy ride. So it's not like putting something up on eBay and just waiting for the offers to come in. So once you go into acquisition, there's there are agreements, there are lawyers, there are legal fees, there are data rooms. You've got just sheets and sheets of things that you need to correlate and cross-correlate and go through the books for the past 3 years. And my goodness, I mean, I don't think we only just had the last request about pre-acquisition accounts 2 weeks ago. So, you know, there's a lot of due diligence. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so you need to make sure that your house is in order in that way as well. And I was very grateful to Lucy Yu, who we'd been employing for 2 or 3 years, I guess, up to the acquisition, to do a sort of, I don't know what you'd call that role. What did we call it? Chief Operating Officer kind of a job, to really keep on top of whether we had trademark agreements in place of things and all that kind of stuff. And I was so grateful for all of that work that Lucy had done when it came to the acquisition, because when we were getting asked by SmartBear's lawyers, you know, have you got an agreement in place for this, that, or the other? And at least 8 times out of 10, it was something that Lucy had been badgering us to do for at least a year, and we'd finally got around to it. So it was really, really helpful to have all of that. So that's a kind of quite a boring, but it is really important to make sure you've got your stuff tidy, because you often don't think about it when you're just kind of scrambling along trying to make a business run. To do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I think that, go on, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think especially having your trademarks is important. You know, there's a lot of red flags that are going to show up for the company who's interested in acquiring the other company. And you know, if we had been in a situation where, for example, we hadn't trademarked Cucumber, or where we were possibly infringing on someone else's trademark, that that could have been a big red flag that could have sunk the whole thing.
Right.
So,
the whole name is at risk.
yeah.
Yep. And I believe it was Seb who you mentioned in one of our previous interviews that one of the things you enjoyed after being acquired is being able to get back to actually doing the work that you love and not running all the paperwork of running the company. Are there other positives post acquisition that you're able to focus a little bit more and just leverage some of the scale of the rest of SmartBear?
Well, for me, the biggest win, having left some of the stuff behind, is knowing that the paycheck is always going to be, has so far always been fulfilled on time every month. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Yep.
For me, it's been having the ability to work full time on Cucumber Open, the open source tool. That's something that I wasn't able to do while we were a startup, only very sporadically, and I always felt guilty that I wasn't fixing enough bugs and merging enough pull requests and making enough releases and all that. So that's made a big change for me, but also for the product.
A little more time to focus.
Yeah.
Right.
And not feeling guilty all the time.
Right. You should be doing something else. Yeah.
So it gave Matt and myself a chance to work on the videos, Cucumber School videos that were released, I guess, 5 years ago now, and sort of passively generating income slowly in the background. But I'd been getting, actually, without us really noticing, had we got quite out of date. So we're updating them, and now under SmartBear's auspices, they've been released as Cucumber School as free online training that anyone listening to this podcast can avail themselves of.
I think it gave us a chance to pick off some of those things that were important but had never been urgent enough, because of the sort of the pace that you're running at when you're trying to survive as a business. Mm-hmm. I think we've been in firefighting mode for a lot of the time for quite some time, and that necessarily means that you're prioritizing things by urgency rather than necessarily always importance, and things like working on the educational side of it and the documentation things are things that just having a bit of breathing space, a bit of extra capacity has given us the headroom to do. I mean, for me personally, when we made the decision to go ahead with the acquisition, barring the legal paperwork, I actually realized that I was burnt out. I'd become quite emotional over the whole thing, realized I was quite emotionally attached to the idea of the business being independent and too attached to it, and that I'd had kind of developed an unhealthy relationship with work, really. And so the rest of the founders encouraged me to take a bit of time off as we led up to the acquisition. So I kind of had about a month off through the sort of April-May period running up to the acquisition. And I think for me personally, what it's done is it's allowed me to put work in a kind of healthier place. So I still work really hard and get a lot of interesting stuff done, but I think it's not quite as, I don't quite know how to put it. It's not as all-consuming. I think running your own company can, for somebody like me who kind of has a bit of a tendency towards workaholism, it can be a thing where you don't really feel like you've ever got an excuse for taking a day off or taking time off and putting your attention on other things. And for me personally, it's been healthy to be able to know that I've got a bigger team around me, a bigger organization around me that can take care of a lot of the things that otherwise I might have been worrying about and not getting done. So being part of a bigger team and a bigger organization's really helped with that.
You have a chance to decompress once in a while.
Yeah, and just a bit of trust the organization to take care of stuff a bit more. Yeah,
that's great. And Seb, with the Cucumber School, my son is heading off to university to major in computer science, and I recommended he learn Cucumber School little bit over the summer. Before
Cool.
that, it's a good concept to know before heading right into coding.
Yeah. I hope he gets on fine. He knows where. I'm sure you'll be able to point him in our direction if he's got any questions or complaints.
Yep, for sure. And wanted to switch topics a little bit to more recently. You and the founders of HipTest, Laurent and team, have joined together to form Cucumber Studio. So it was almost like, a merger after the merger. Do you have any thoughts on how that went, or just some advice and stories on collaborating with another founding team and coming out with a fantastic combined product and brand out of the two of you coming together?
Well, I'm sure it'll be different for anybody, for everybody in that sort of position. It'll be different, but the HipTest team have been amazing. I mean, they're based in France, so strangely enough, their language of work is French. We're not based in France, so most of us don't speak French. And literally overnight, they started speaking English on all of their meetings. They've been just the most incredibly accommodating people to work with. And when I went out there, one of the first things I did was go out and run our flagship BDD training on site at their offices, and they were very welcoming. They clearly didn't feel threatened by us. We were just all working together towards a common end. So no, it's been really very, very trouble-free merging with HipTest and working towards the same goals.
That's great. Yeah, we've got a few other episodes where we've interviewed Laurent and Severine and team, and they really have no end to their energy and enthusiasm about what they're doing, and certainly are big, BDD advocates out there in the world. So it seems like a great fit. I don't know if you had anything to add, Matt.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I think it was part of our due diligence process as we explored the deal, was the specifics of, because the way I saw it was like a merger between, it was like SmartBear was the investor facilitating a merger between HipTest and Cucumber. That was kind of how I looked at it, because, we've ended up merging together into one. I mean, it's not exactly a business unit because we haven't got control of the P&L, but there's a product portfolio there now. And so understanding what their culture was and how they worked, and that was like, as talked about, like for cultural fit, that specific team and that group and how they like to work and work together was really important to understand. And we picked that sense up from Laurent about how he built that team. And we weren't, like Seb said, we weren't disappointed at all. They've been a really great team to work with. They share a lot of the basic values that we do about releasing software early and iterating quickly. And so I think it's important from a sort of lessons learned point of view to really do your homework and figure out if this, because we work with them every day. And we have to be able to get along, and it isn't just a matter of luck that we do.
And I think one of the first things we did after the acquisition was to spend the first month just getting to know each other, because we all knew that if we don't know each other and trust each other, we can't create anything together. You're taking two different companies. Or at least there used to be two. HipTest was one company, Cucumber was one company a year before. Put them together. Us from Cucumber traveled over to Besançon in France 2 or 3 times, and just getting to know each other. And while we were there, we were laying up, the strategy for how we can combine our products and move forward with the branding in a way that everybody felt that they had a say. I think that's also very important, that when companies are acquired and merged, that you involve people to feel that they have a say. Because if the people on the team feel that they don't have a say, then they're going to form an awful job, right?
Right. Or they just won't feel.
And we want everybody to be invested emotionally as well. And I think the way we've handled that, at least to me, it seems that we did that pretty well, and we're still doing it. But it's not, you can't skip that. You can't skip that getting to know each other and just say get to work, start coding. That doesn't work.
Yeah, I love just the spirit of collaboration in all of you and all of the folks at HipTast is really comes out in the conversations, and you don't see that everywhere. It's very refreshing to see that, everybody workshops ideas and gets to the right conclusion together. I've got one last quick hit question, and this is something to help folks, listening or watching, who are looking at becoming entrepreneurs or selling their company. In 3 words, how would you describe what makes for a true entrepreneurial spirit, for having each of you share up to 3 words that are characteristics that you see in yourselves or in each other?
Okay. I like the way you framed this question about being about other people. So I've got the words I would say about these 2. So Aslak is tenacious. That's one of Aslak's real strengths. He just, especially with technical problems, but all kinds of things, once he gets his teeth into a problem, he just does not let go until he's figured it out. And I think that kind of tenacity is a really valuable strength. And Seb is the realist. So you can trust Seb to tell you exactly how it is. He can see through bullshit, and he calls bullshit, and he tells you exactly what he helps you to see. Helps everyone to see the reality of situations, and that is a sort of wonderful strength to have in a team as well. So those are 2 of them.
Super.
Thank you.
Seb?
Thank you, Matt.
Well, so I think the one word that I would use to describe Matt's qualities is honesty. He's honest about his emotions. He's honest about the way he's feeling. He's honest about what he thinks about the work you've done or technology that has been adopted. And the real strength that Aslak has got is that he's got a really clear technical vision. That's not one word. I'm not sure how I would put that into one word.
Vision works?
Well, no, but I don't want to get into vision because it's specifically technical vision. But he grasps the technology super fast. Quite often I have to wait minutes, hours, days before I've understood what he's summed up in.
If you really mean. Yep, I did say 3 words or less, so that counts. Excellent.
And I will say about you, Seb, very similar to what Matt said, that you are, I think you're probably the most business oriented out of us, quite realistic. When all the rest of us are dreaming, you're snapping your fingers and you're like, actually, let's get real here. And that's helped us in so many different situations. And for you, Matt, I think one of your greatest qualities is that I've always thought of you as the leader in turning our customers into fans. You've done so much for creating and building Cucumber's personality and brand value, whether it's through our our podcasts or the book that you and I wrote, which you really wrote. And conferences, creating that personal touch that turns our customers into fans. I mean, we've all done it, but I think you've been the greatest leader of that.
Those are excellent characteristics. And if you combine all that and you get success, that's really, really nice to hear. Thank you for that answer. And I think we are done. Do you have any parting words for the audiences? Stick with it. Don't give up.
You're giving us words now.
All right. I'm putting a few of my own. Yeah.
I wouldn't say don't give up, actually, because sometimes you should give up. You shouldn't just hang on to an idea just because you think it's right. Sometimes you have to look reality in the eye and throw in the towel, but other times you just have to stick with it. It's difficult to give a very general advice.
It's probably the thing I've wrestled with the most, the don't give up thing, because I think, as an entrepreneur, you probably have to not give up when other people would, but equally, if you do that all the time, you will just wear yourself out and never get, and go down blind alleys. So that's the art of this.
Yeah, I mean, you need to understand what's important for yourself.
Yeah.
So we started off wanting to start a business, but the times come when you think, well, am I prepared to gamble my house? Am I prepared to gamble my children's education? What my relationship? How far am I prepared to take it? And at that point, you need to decide whether, it's time to take a different tack.
Super. And with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you all for listening, and really appreciate your time today. Thank you all three.
Pleasure. Thanks, Cynthia. It's been really nice to do it.
Yep. Lovely conversation.